Hi there, welcome back to ADSR Massive Tutorials. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make that DnB bass we had playing there, utilising all four modulators here, the green modulators, so LFOs, performers and steppers. Also going to be looking at the routing section and various different effects and just how we put this sound together. The MIDI that we have playing there, very straightforward. It's just a sustained G2 note with a little bit of programming and some pitch bend. I'm also going to discuss how I created this sublayer to the bass sound once I initially created that kind of mid-range DnB bass. So you can download everything we've used in this project, the Logic file, the Logic project, the massive patches, and I've used a DnB double beat that's one of the Logic Apple loops that comes bundled with Logic Pro X, so you could load this kind of loop I've got here, you could load it up exactly as it is in Logic if you have Logic. So there's a link on the screen to download all of that stuff, and let's go ahead and start recreating this massive patch here. So let's just solo this up and a little bit of channel EQ, take that off, and let's just create a new sound in here. So for starters, I'm just going to loop this first kind of MIDI region we have here, and I just want to get a really nice solid kind of bass tone together. So I'm going to use two Strontium wavetables in oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. So oscillator 1, Strontium, wavetable position about halfway, and we can change the mode to bend minus plus, bring the intensity down a little bit, and let's bring the pitch down by 1 octave. Nice kind of fat bass tone. And oscillator 2, turn that on, and again Strontium, bring the wavetable position to a similar kind of place there, but I'm gonna leave this in spectrum mode with the intensity on full, bring the pitch down by 1 octave, and those two wavetables or oscillators are kind of complementing each other, reinforcing each other really. And oscillator 3, I'm going to go for the Duckorgan wavetable, and I'm going to bring the pitch down by 1 octave, and again I'm going to go to bend minus plus mode, take the intensity to about 3/4, wavetable position so just past halfway, and I know it's putting this sound together, the wavetable position, moving that sounds pretty cool. So I'm going to come back and modulate that in a sec. So let's move to this oscillator section now. Check the restart via gate so it re-triggers all the oscillator phases, and you can play around with these if you want. It kind of sounds pretty solid with them all lined up like that. So with that set up, let's get into some modulation. So I'm going to start off here. Actually, I'm going to go to this envelope 4, just sharpen up the attack, trigger 0, reset on the envelope, and this first LFO slot here, I'm going to use a stepper here, and I'm going to use this to modulate the wavetable position of the Duckorgan in oscillator 3. So click and drag the crosshair from this stepper over to the first modulation box in this wavetable position, click and drag up to apply that modulation, and let's set up this stepper, sync it 1/16, maybe even activate the snap to grid, and we can just play around with a couple of these steps here. We're getting a little bit of a rhythm going. So that's sounding pretty cool. Bit of a rhythm on that oscillator 3, just moving that wavetable position kind of all the way around the back again. Let's take it one step further and look at this filter section now. So in filter 1, I'm going to go for a scream filter. It's quite a nice filter. It brings a bit of distortion into the sound. So especially with high kind of resonance values, high scream and resonance values can get quite a distorted sound. So I'm going to bring the cutoff to just past halfway. The scream I'm going to bring down to about 1/3, and the resonance to about just past a 1/4 of the way up. And for starters, I'm going to modulate this cutoff frequency here with this LFO, the second LFO here. So click and drag the crosshair, this LFO, cutoff frequency, click and drag up to apply a full amount of modulation. And let's set up this LFO, let's sync it, and if you actually take the ratio to something like 3/16, you get that kind of like triplet effect on the LFO, which sounds pretty cool. And we can also play around with this X fade curve here, and although we've got the option of mixing between a sine wave for this LFO or a sawtooth wave, I should get a lot more options if I click that kind of drop down menu there. So I'm going to go for bending 9 because this has a really interesting kind of shape, and just play around with the start and end points of it. And it's just got, you know, quite a unique sort of like shape on the sound now. Blend the sine wave back in. Check that that's kind of working with the beat. So that's sounding pretty cool. Let's go back to massive here, and let's look at this resonance here. Let's modulate that as well. So another LFO in here. It's going to stay as an LFO rather than changing it to performer or stepper. Sync it, and ratio can be 1/16, and then click and drag the crosshair, this LFO, to the resonance, and then click and drag up. And it's just a bit of extra movement on that kind of resonance control. A cool way to exaggerate that would be to go to this EQ here. Something you can do with these mid-range basses to add a little bit of movement in the top end is modulate the high shelf here. So I'm going to use this same LFO to modulate this high shelf. Just an extra little bit of kind of like fizz in the top end of the sound. And let's set up these filters slightly differently here. So I'm going to change it into the mode into serial mode, and bring the mix down to mix 2, and bring the volume of filter 2 up. So now the sound is passing through both filters and then to the output. And so in filter 2, I'm going to select a DAF filter, take the resonance right down, and modulate the sound even further using this final LFO slot here. Change this to a performer, click and drag the crosshair this performer to the cutoff frequency, the first modulation slot on the cutoff frequency of filter 2, click and drag up, and let's set this performer ratio 1/8. Bring the X fade curve, the X fade sequence to the top, and let's load a few different curves in here. And you could just play around with this until you've sort of found a rhythm that you really liked. This is how I had it set up. So just by clicking on these curves and then clicking on the performer step, I'm loading a curve into that step there. And got this quite nice rhythm going. Let's actually move over here. It's a bass sound, so mono rotate or monophonic. So that's sounding pretty cool. And let's actually go and start setting up some effects on the sound, just to drive the sound a little bit, just to beef it up a little bit. So classic tube will be good here. It's driving it quite nicely, and this dimension expander is just going to give it a bit more depth. Bring the master down here. Keep referencing it with a beat. And one thing over in the oscillator section, we've had some pitch bend on the sound. So for that pitch bend to actually kind of be active, or to be as extreme as we've got it here, I need to check the pitch bend up and down here to plus 24 and minus 24. So any pitch bend, any kind of MIDI pitch bend stuff you do, it's going to be a lot more extreme, so you get those extreme pitch bend effects. Take that glide off, and let's move and look at the effects a bit more. So we set up these effects here, effects 1 and 2. Insert 1, I'm going to have an S shaper, and let's solo this sound up again. And it's kind of important really, if you're doing quite extreme distortion effects, to play around with the insert. So I'm going to have the drive quite high, the dry wet quite high, and then just, it's kind of too much there probably on the insert. But if I insert it before filter 1, the sound, it helps the tone, it shapes it really nicely. That's with it inserted at the sine shaper inserted after filter 1, and that's with it inserted before. Quite nice what it does to the character of the sound. And in insert 2, I'm also going to have an effect here, sample and hold. I'm going to insert this after both of the filters here. Take the pitch right up though, and again it's just helping, it's just a bit of sizzle on the top end. Let's move it off, let's move it back on. And the final thing I was going to do was some more movement on the EQ. So I noticed kind of sweeping these things around, the boost and the frequency was sounding pretty cool. So we could add a little, we've run out of LFOs now, but we could add an envelope to modulate the frequency of the EQ. So go over to this first envelope here, click and drag the crosshair of this and drag it to the first modulation box on the frequency here in the EQ section, and just click and drag down, and let's back off the attack here and just push up this stain, trigger 0 reset so the envelope re-triggers and something like that. So now we've got this frequency boost here, and the frequency is actually going to sweep down from a high frequency to a low. So you're going to kind of get a bit of a bandpass sweep going on now. More. Again, just more movement. It sounds quite cool on this bass sound. We're just sustaining one note, but it's all in the movement of the bass sound really. So, and then yeah, a little bit of programming that I put into the bass sound was just let's have a look at this. Just chopped the MIDI up a little bit there, and then added that pitch bend. So that sounded pretty cool as maybe a bass fill. I've added a channel EQ. I've just rolled off about 120 Hz. I've just kind of done a low frequency roll off, because then I included, to beef up the sound, a sub layer, and I made this sub sound by duplicating the patch that we made there, but then I muted oscillator 2 and oscillator 3, and I converted oscillator 1 into a sine wave, pitched down 2 octaves, and I opened up the filter on filter 2, so there wasn't, because I noticed with the filter down, like, we were getting a little bit of clipping going on, so I just thought it sounded a bit more kind of rhythmic with the filter 2 open. And I've taken the dimension expander off because it can add a little bit of width, stereo width to sounds, a dimension expander, which is not what you'd want on a sub sound. And I've turned the EQ off as well, so I've still got the tube on there, bit of distortion. I've turned the inserts off as well, so it's just more of a solid clean sound really, but it just complements the mid-range bass. I've also added a bit of EQ, rolled off any kind of mid or high frequency on this sub, so it's just focused on that kind of low end region, so it's just complementing that mid-range bass. And there you have it. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you found it useful. You can download everything we've used in the tutorial, massive patches, the Logic project if you have Logic Pro, the MIDI files. You can download them. There's a link at the start of the video. And yeah, any questions, get in touch, let us know. Thanks for watching. Cheers.